I tried to push myself up from the cold metal floor, but my arms shook and gave out. The throbbing in my skull felt like someone had taken a hammer to the back of my head. Every surface around me was bright white and clean, with blinking red lights that made my eyes water. Alarms shrieked through the corridor, the loud wailing making my headache worse. I managed to get on my knees and looked around, trying to make sense of where I was. The walls curved slightly, lined with what looked like access panels and emergency equipment I didn't recognize. Everything had that industrial, practical look you'd expect on some kind of vessel. A man appeared at the end of the corridor, moving quickly but not quite running. He was older, maybe 60, with deep wrinkles on his face and gray hair that stuck out at odd angles. His clothes were practical, dark pants and a worn jacket that had seen better days. Something about the way he carried himself reminded me of old Western movies, like he'd be more comfortable on horseback than in whatever this place was. "We need to move," he said when he reached me, extending a hand to help me up. I stared at him, looking through my memory for any recognition. Nothing. His face was completely new to me, but there was something in his eyes, a sense that he knew me, like he was looking at someone he knew well. It made my skin crawl a little. "Who are you?" I asked, accepting his help to stand. My legs were unsteady, but they held my weight. "Robert," he said simply, keeping his hand on my elbow to steady me. "Come on. We need to follow the plan." The way he said it made it sound like I should know what he was talking about, like this was something we'd discussed before. But I had no idea what plan he meant, or why we needed to follow it. I didn't even know where we were, let alone what we were supposed to be doing. "What plan?" I asked. Robert stopped walking and turned to look at me. His face changed from urgent to confused, then to something almost sad. He looked at me for a bit, and I could tell he was thinking about something that wasn't good news. "You don't remember again," he muttered, more to himself than to me. Again. What was that supposed to mean? I opened my mouth to ask, but before I could get the words out, a sound carried through the corridor that scared me badly. It was a screech, but not from any animal I'd ever heard. It was deeper, more guttural, with an electronic quality that suggested it came from something that shouldn't exist. "The beast," Robert whispered. He grabbed my arm and pulled me toward what looked like a maintenance closet. The door slid open when he touched a panel, and he pushed me inside ahead of him. The space was cramped, filled with pipes and electrical components that made a low noise. Robert positioned himself so he could see through the crack where the door didn't quite meet the frame. The corridor outside went quiet except for the constant alarm. Then I heard it. Footsteps, but wrong somehow. Too heavy, with an odd rhythm that didn't match human movement. Whatever was making those sounds was massive, and it was getting closer. A shadow passed by the closet, blocking out the red emergency lighting for several seconds. I held my breath, pressing myself against the back wall. The footsteps paused right outside our hiding spot, and I was certain whatever it was had detected us. Then the sounds moved on, fading down the corridor. Robert was checking his watch, counting under his breath. I watched him mouth the numbers. 3, 2, 1. The explosion hit exactly when he reached 0. The entire ship lurched, throwing me against the wall of the closet. Emergency lighting blinked, and I could hear metal groaning under stress somewhere in the distance. The alarms changed pitch, becoming more urgent. I looked at Robert in the dim red light, a cold realization running up my spine. He'd known exactly when that explosion would happen. Not guessed. Known. He'd counted down to it like he was following a script. This has happened before, hasn't it? Robert clenched his jaw as he looked at me in the tiny maintenance closet. My question sat there between us under the red emergency lights. I could tell he was trying to decide what to tell me. He stayed quiet for so long that I already knew the answer before he said anything. "Yeah," he said finally. "It has." 3 hours later, we were pressed against the metal tables in what used to be the ship's mess hall. The space felt like a cafeteria that had been hit by an earthquake. Chairs scattered everywhere, food trays crushed underfoot, and broken glass from the serving area creating a minefield across half the floor. The fluorescent lights overhead blinked on and off, making me jump every few seconds. Robert worked quickly at the main entrance, shoving tables and chairs against the doorframe. He lifted a bench and wedged it across the top. Whatever was out there had been circling the mess hall for the last 20 minutes, and we could hear it moving. That same wrong rhythm of footsteps I'd noticed earlier, but slower now, more deliberate. "Hand me that chair," Robert muttered, pointing to an overturned piece near my feet. I grabbed it and helped him position it against the barricade. The metal scraped against the floor, and we both froze, listening. The footsteps outside paused. Then they resumed, moving away from our door. "What exactly are we dealing with?" I whispered. Robert wiped sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. "Something that shouldn't exist. Something that got pulled through when..." He stopped himself, shaking his head. "Look, right now, we need to focus on getting you somewhere safe." I'd been searching through the mess hall while he worked on the barricade, looking for anything that might serve as a weapon or tool. The kitchen area had been ransacked, with pots and pans thrown everywhere, but most of the knives were missing from their magnetic strip. I found a ladle and a meat tenderizer, which seemed ridiculous as potential weapons, but they were better than nothing. The display cases near the serving line had been shattered, their contents scattered across the floor. Broken plates mixed with what looked like commemorative items, photos, plaques, small trophies. I picked through the debris carefully, trying not to cut myself on the glass. "You need to get to the lab," Robert said suddenly. I turned to see him taking something from his jacket pocket. It was small, about the size of a phone, but thicker. When he held it up, it gave off a green light that reminded me of those cheap glow sticks kids use on Halloween. The light blinked slowly. "What is that?" "Insurance," he said, slipping it back into his pocket. "Look, Emily, I need you to listen to me. When I leave here, you wait 5 minutes, then you head for the lower decks. Find the lab." "When you leave? What are you talking about?" Robert's expression hardened into something determined and sad at the same time. "I'm going to draw it away from here. Give you a chance to get where you need to go." "That's insane. We should stick together." "No." His voice was firm. "Trust me on this. You need to go back to where it all began." The way he said it made my skin crawl, like he was quoting something or repeating words he'd said before. The phrase sounded important, like it meant more than just finding some laboratory. "Robert, I don't understand what's happening here. I don't remember how I got on this ship. I don't know what that thing is outside. And I sure as hell don't know why you're talking like we've planned this all out." He moved closer, and for a moment I thought he was going to explain everything. Instead, he just put his hand on my shoulder and squeezed gently. "I know you don't remember, but you will. Some of it, anyway." He glanced toward the barricaded door. "Just promise me you'll get to the lab. Promise me you won't try to follow me." Before I could answer, he started pulling away the furniture he'd just finished stacking. I grabbed his arm. "Don't do this. I have to." He removed my hand gently but firmly. 5 minutes, Emily. Then you go." He slipped through the gap he'd created in the barricade, and I heard him moving away from the door. His footsteps were deliberately loud, carrying through the corridor outside. Then I heard him calling out. Not words, just noise, drawing attention to himself. The response was immediate. That same electronic screech I'd heard earlier, but closer now. Much closer. Then the sound of Robert running, his boots pounding against the metal deck plates. The creature gave chase, and I could track their movement as the sounds faded into the distance. A roar carried through the ship, followed by what sounded like metal being torn apart. Then a scream, human, male, cut short. I pressed my back against the wall and closed my eyes, fighting back tears for a man I barely knew but somehow trusted completely. The silence that followed felt heavy and final. When I opened my eyes, I was looking directly at a photograph half buried under broken glass near my feet. I knelt down and picked it up carefully, brushing away the debris. 3 people smiled back at me from the picture. The man on the left was younger than the Robert I'd just met, but it was definitely him. Same weathered face, same intense eyes. The woman in the middle took me a moment to recognize as myself, but younger, maybe 10 years old, grinning with missing front teeth. On the right was a man I knew instinctively was my father, though I couldn't place where or when I'd seen him. The sight of the photograph shocked me. Memories started surfacing. Fragments at first, then clearer images. Robert pushing me on a swing set. Robert teaching me to ride a bicycle, running alongside me with his hand on the seat. Robert at birthday parties, always in the background but always there. Not just my father's colleague or friend. Family. The uncle I'd never officially had but who'd been present for every important moment of my childhood. I flipped the photograph over. Lab Team Alpha was printed on the back in neat block letters. The lab. Robert had said to go back to where it all began. And now I knew. This wasn't just about finding some random laboratory on the ship. This was about finding my father. I made my way back through the mess hall to the service entrance, a smaller door that connected to the kitchen area. It opened onto a maintenance corridor that was narrower than the main hallways, but better lit. Emergency strips along the floor provided steady white light, and the walls were lined with access panels and routing diagrams. The ship's layout was starting to make sense as I moved through the tunnels. Color-coded pipes ran along the ceiling, blue for water, red for heating, yellow for electrical conduits. Signs at each junction indicated different sections: engineering, medical, communications, research. I followed the ones pointing toward research, working my way deeper into the ship. My memories were coming back in pieces now. Not everything, but enough to guide me. I remembered this ship, not clearly, but the feel of it. The slight vibration in the deck plates from the engines. The particular smell of recycled air and cleaning chemicals. I'd been here before, though I couldn't remember when or why. The maintenance tunnels connected most of the ship's major systems, allowing me to avoid the main corridors where the beast might be waiting. I crawled through sections that were barely wide enough for a person, squeezed past massive pipe assemblies, and climbed down ladder wells that seemed to go on forever. Each level I descended felt more familiar. By the time I reached what the signs indicated was Deck 7, I was moving more by instinct than by following the directional markers. Left at the junction with the purple pipes, right past the electrical substation, down another ladder to Deck 8. The research section was at the very bottom of the ship, apparently. The maintenance access here was different, cleaner, more sophisticated. Instead of bare metal walls, these tunnels had white panels and better lighting. The pipes were hidden behind covers and everything had the sterile feel of a laboratory environment. I found the exit I was looking for without really understanding how I knew it was the right one. The access panel opened onto a corridor that looked like something from a high-tech medical facility. Clean white walls, bright overhead lighting, and doors marked with technical designations I didn't recognize. But at the end of the corridor, one door was different. Larger, with a small window and a sign that simply read, Laboratory A. As I approached it, more memories surfaced. My father, younger than in the photograph, explaining something about quantum mechanics while I pretended to understand. Robert laughing at my confused expression. Long hours spent in this same corridor while the adults worked on something they described as important for everyone. I reached the door and peered through the window. Inside, I could see equipment that looked like a cross between a computer lab and a mad scientist's workshop. Banks of monitors displayed scrolling data, and in the center of the room stood something that looked like a machine from a science fiction movie, all curves and glowing components. And standing at a console with his back to me, frantically working at a keyboard, was my father. I pushed open the door to Laboratory A and stepped inside. The space was exactly as I'd seen through the window. Banks of monitors showing streams of data, equipment running quietly, and in the center of it all, that strange machine with its curved surfaces and glowing parts. The air smelled like ozone and hot electronics, which made me feel uncomfortable. Dad? The man at the console spun around so fast he nearly knocked over his chair. For a moment, we just stared at each other across the lab. His face was older than in the photograph I'd found, more lined with stress and exhaustion, but it was definitely him. Thomas Wilson. My father. I suddenly remembered things I hadn't thought about in years. Emily! His voice cracked with emotion. You remembered this time. This time. I stared at the weird device my father had been working on. Everything suddenly made sense. The glowing parts, the curved surfaces, the way it pulsed with that same rhythm I'd seen in Robert's pocket device. This wasn't just lab equipment. This was something that could change time itself. Dad, the explosion Robert predicted. I turned to face him, the idea crystallizing. It's the engines overloading, isn't it? Thomas nodded slowly, his expression grim. The containment field fails every time. Same sequence, same timing. We've tried to prevent it, but the loop always resets before we can implement any lasting changes. I moved closer to the central console and looked at the readouts on multiple screens. Numbers ran down in a steady, predictable pattern, counting down to the same disaster. What if we don't try to prevent it? I said. What if we make it happen earlier? My father's head snapped up from the keyboard where he'd been typing. Emily, that would be suicide. Maybe. Or maybe it's the only way out. I gestured toward the time device. You said the loop resets when the ship is destroyed. But what if we triggered the destruction ourselves, on our terms, and jumped into space right as it happened? The paradox might be enough to break the whole thing. Thomas was quiet for a long moment, looking between me and the screens showing the ship's engine status. I could tell he was thinking hard about what to do next. When he finally spoke, his voice was cautious. The timing would have to be perfect, and we'd need to reach the airlocks before the engines went critical. Can you access the engine controls from here? He nodded toward a secondary console across the lab. Emergency overrides are hardwired through the research network. I can trigger a controlled overload, but once it starts, we'll have maybe 10 minutes before total containment failure. I was already moving toward the console he'd pointed to. Then, let's do it. Emily, wait. He caught my arm as I passed him. There's no guarantee this will work. We could just die, permanently this time. I looked into his eyes and saw the same exhaustion I'd seen in Robert's face. How many times had they lived through this nightmare? How many attempts had they made to break free? I thought about what Robert did for us in the mess hall, the way he'd talked about getting me to safety, as if he knew exactly what would happen next. Dad, how long have we been trapped in this loop? His shoulders sagged. 87 cycles. Nearly 3 months of real time, if time means anything anymore. The number shocked me. 3 months. Robert had died 87 times, each one thinking it might be the last. I'd lost my memory and regained it over and over, probably having this same conversation multiple times. The thought made me sick. Then we have to try something different, I said. Thomas let go of my arm and went to the engine control console. He quickly typed on the screen, checking the systems and looking for ways to override them. I stood at the security station, looking through different cameras to keep track of where the beast was. The creature was 3 decks above us, moving through what looked like the crew quarters. It was moving differently now, like it knew where it was going. On the fuzzy security screen, I could see its huge body as it stopped at doorways, sniffing around. Hunting. How long until you can trigger the overload? I asked. Give me 5 minutes to bypass the safety protocols. Thomas's voice was tight with concentration. The system wasn't designed to allow manual containment failure. I have to convince it that normal shutdown procedures have failed. I kept looking through the security feeds, following the beast as it moved. It was on deck 6 now, getting closer to the research level. Something about how it was acting seemed different this time. More urgent, more focused. Like it knew what we were planning. Dad, I think it can sense what we're doing. He glanced up from his console. What do you mean? Look. I pointed to the security monitor. The beast had stopped moving through the crew quarters and was now heading directly for the stairwells that led to the lower decks. Its path was too direct to be coincidental. Thomas cursed under his breath and redoubled his efforts at the engine controls. Almost there. Just need to disable one more safety interlock. The security feed showed the beast reaching deck 7. It went past the maintenance access I'd used earlier without stopping, heading straight for the main elevator that connected to the research section. How much longer? 30 seconds. I watched the elevator indicator on the security panel. The beast was descending. Deck 8, Deck 9. The research level was Deck 10, and once it reached our corridor, we'd have nowhere to run except toward the airlocks. Got it. Thomas's console lit up with warning indicators as he executed the override. Engines will reach critical overload in 8 minutes. We need to move now. I was already at the lab door, checking the corridor through the small window. Empty, but I could hear the elevator coming down. We had maybe 30 seconds before the beast reached our level. Airlocks are 2 sections over, Thomas said, grabbing an emergency kit from a wall-mounted compartment. Can you remember the way? Memory flashes guided me as we left the lab. Turn right out of Laboratory A, follow the corridor past the storage rooms, left at the junction marked with yellow warning stripes. The beast's footsteps could be heard from somewhere behind us, growing louder. We reached the first blast door that separated the laboratory section from the rest of Deck 10. Thomas slammed his hand on the emergency seal control, and heavy metal barriers dropped into place behind us. The impact of the beast hitting the door came seconds later, a thunderous crash that shook the entire corridor. That won't hold it long, Thomas said. We ran through the connecting passage, past storage compartments and utility access points. The airlock section was clearly marked with bright yellow signs and emergency lighting. Behind us, the sound of metal being torn apart told us the beast had broken through the first barrier. The airlock chamber was larger than I'd expected, with space for 6 people in emergency suits. Thomas immediately went to the equipment lockers while I sealed the inner door and activated the manual override that would prevent it from opening even if someone had the access codes. Here, he handed me a bulky spacesuit that smelled like rubber and disinfectant. These are rated for short-term exposure. Should keep us alive long enough to be picked up. I struggled into the suit, my hand shaking as I worked the seals and connections. I put on the helmet and the heads-up display lit up as soon as I got it properly positioned. Oxygen levels, suit pressure, communication status, all reading normal. Through the airlock's inner door, we could hear the beast getting closer. Another crash, closer this time. It had broken through the second barrier. "How much time left on the engines?" I asked through the suit's comm system. Thomas checked a portable display he'd brought from the lab. 4 minutes until containment failure. I moved to the outer airlock door and started the depressurization sequence. Warning lights flashed as the chamber began venting atmosphere. The sound of the beast in the corridor grew muffled as the air thinned. "Emily," my father's voice was soft through the comm. "I want you to know how proud I am of you. Whatever happens next." I turned to look at him through our helmet visors. Behind the glass, I could see tears in his eyes. For a moment, he looked exactly like the father from my memories, the dad who taught me to ride a bicycle and helped me with homework. "We're going to make it," I said. "Both of us." The inner door exploded inward just as the depressurization cycle completed. The beast rushed into the airlock chamber. Up close, it was even more horrible than I'd imagined. A weird mix of metal and flesh with too many joints and surfaces that shined in the emergency lighting. It came at us really fast. I grabbed my father's gloved hand and hit the outer door release. "On 3, I said, watching the door begin to iris open. Space was right there beyond it, complete darkness with distant stars. 1. The beast lunged forward, reaching for us with appendages that ended in razor-sharp talons. 2. Warning klaxons echoed through the ship as the engines reached critical overload. Through the suit's external sensors, I could feel the vibrations traveling through the hull. 3. We jumped. Falling into space felt impossible to put into words. 1 second we were in the bright, warm airlock, and the next we were spinning through freezing emptiness. All I could hear was our breathing and the quiet noise from our suit systems. Behind us, the ship started breaking apart. The engines blew up with a blinding light that made everything around us white. The explosion raced across the ship, and within seconds the whole thing was gone in a massive fireball. I watched it all while slowly turning in space, holding tight to my father's hand. The ship that had been our prison for 87 cycles was gone, just scattered pieces and dying light. Then the shockwave hit us, and everything went black. I woke up in a bed that was too soft, in a room that was too quiet. White walls, clean sheets, and soft lighting that looked like a hospital. My body felt weird. I was groggy, as if I'd slept for days. "You're awake." The voice belonged to a middle-aged woman in a white coat who was checking a tablet at the foot of my bed. "I'm Dr. Martinez. You've been unconscious for 2 days." I tried to sit up and immediately regretted it as the room spun around me. "My father. Where's my father?" "Mr. Wilson is in the next room, recovering well. You were both extremely lucky. The cargo freighter that picked you up was conducting a routine patrol when they detected your emergency beacons." Relief flooded through me. We'd made it. Whatever had happened to break the loop, we were alive and free. I looked around the medical bay, noting details that proved this was real. The slightly uneven paint on the walls, the random arrangement of equipment, the doctor's rumpled coat, none of the sterile perfection of the ship we'd escaped. "There was another man," I said. "Robert, older, gray hair. Did they find him too?" Dr. Martinez nodded. "He was picked up about 6 hours after you, unconscious in an emergency pod, but alive. He's been asking about you since he woke up." Robert was alive. I closed my eyes and felt relieved. Somehow, breaking the loop had saved all of us. "Doctor, the ship we were on, what happened to it?" "Completely destroyed. The rescue team found debris scattered across several thousand kilometers of space. Whatever caused the explosion, it was catastrophic. She paused, studying my face. Do you remember what happened? I started to answer, then stopped. How could I explain time loops and creatures that shouldn't exist? How could I make anyone believe that we'd lived the same disaster 87 times before finally breaking free? Engine failure, I said. We barely made it to the escape pods. Dr. Martinez made a note on her tablet. Well, you're safe now. The Meridian is a research vessel, so we're well equipped to handle any medical issues from your exposure. You should make a full recovery. I nodded, but something in her expression made me stop. There was a careful quality to her words, like she was choosing them deliberately. Doctor, is there something else? She hesitated, then set her tablet aside. Since you were rescued, there have been reports. Other ships in this sector experiencing unusual encounters. Crews describing things that don't match any known technology or life forms. I suddenly felt cold. What kind of encounters? Attacks, mostly. Ships found drifting with their crews missing or worse. The descriptions of the perpetrators are... She struggled for words. They're consistent with each other, but they describe things that shouldn't be possible. I looked toward the wall that separated my room from my father's. We'd broken the loop, escaped the ship, thought we'd left our nightmare behind. But if other ships were encountering similar creatures, if what we'd faced was spreading somehow, I need to see my father. Dr. Martinez nodded. I'll arrange it. But first, you should rest. Whatever you've been through, it's left both of you severely traumatized. Recovery will take time. After she left, I lay back on the soft bed and looked at the ceiling. We were free from the loop, but our nightmare wasn't over. It was just beginning to spread to the rest of the galaxy. I thought about Robert, alive somewhere on this ship, probably coming to the same realization. I thought about the beast, and whether destroying the ship had truly destroyed it, or simply released it into space. We'd broken free, but at what cost? And what were we going to do about the reports Dr. Martinez had mentioned? The questions kept running through my mind as exhaustion pulled me back toward sleep. But for the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't afraid of what I might remember when I woke up.